There's a company from the Netherlands, roughly 400 years old, and so incredibly valuable that even Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Saudi Aramco combined wouldn't come close. Not a tech giant, not a modern brand, but a silent empire from the 17th century. When we talk about capitalism, wealth, and old money, the same names always come up: Rothschilds, Rockefellers. But hardly anyone talks about the company that made all of that possible. The world's first corporation, the first stock exchange, the first IPO in history. And here's the mindfuck. This company exists in some form to this day. If you want more stories about power, money, and history, subscribe now and leave a like. This is going to be wild. We're writing the year 1580. Something groundbreaking happens on the Iberian Peninsula. Spain takes over Portugal in a personal union. Two global powers merge under one monarchy. Together, they control vast territories in Asia, Africa, and America. For the Netherlands, this is an existential threat. They technically belonged to Spain at this point, but were fighting for independence. Suddenly, they face a much more powerful opponent. With Portugal under Spain's crown, they seem unstoppable. The Dutch know they can't win with weapons alone, so they create a new kind of weapon: private capital. In 1602, 7 private trading companies merge into what we now call the Dutch East India Company, or VOC. It's called that because it was Dutch and mainly traded with the East Indian Islands, today's Indonesia, Malaysia, and surroundings. On the surface, it looks like an ordinary trading company, but in reality, it's a machine of economic warfare. Armed ships, private armies, fortresses worldwide. But the most radical part, it's shares. For the first time in history, ordinary Dutch citizens can finance imperial expansion and profit from it. The VOC can scale like no kingdom before, without a monarch, without raising taxes. This is wealth no longer tied to land or titles. This is wealth produced through markets on a massive scale. But who keeps this company running? The merchants run the business, but someone else ensures the foundation stays stable. Across the Republic, the House of Orange watches. This dynasty is one of the most significant of its time, but they don't own a kingdom. They have only a weak title and a fragile peace in a merchant-led republic. Their nobility doesn't mean much in this new order. They're pressured from both sides. Amsterdam's elites want more republican control. Spain wants to eliminate the dynasty. The House of Orange faces a choice: sink into irrelevance or adapt. They can no longer rely on feudal land or inherited gold. They use the only thing they have left: capital. The House of Orange doesn't lead the VOC, but they finance it. More importantly, they bind their future to it. This isn't a symbolic gesture. Their involvement gives them strategic influence in a merchant republic where legacy alone no longer guarantees power. Decades later, this connection becomes official. Willem III and Willem IV, descendants of the House of Orange, serve as presidents of the VOC and the West India Company. They become the most powerful men in the country and Europe. As the company expands eastward, the family rises from nobles to something far greater, still without a crown, but undeniably with power secured through dividends. The VOC doesn't behave like a company, it moves like a sovereign, and that was exactly the point. At its peak, the VOC is worth more than $7.9 trillion in today's money. For comparison, the world's most valuable company today is Nvidia at half that valuation. During the VOC's golden age, from the early 16th to mid-18th century, over 1 million people leave the Netherlands for Asia. They're not explorers or settlers, they're employees of a mega corporation. The VOC's success stands on 3 pillars: a powerful state charter, Amsterdam's financial elite, and the strategic support of the House of Orange. The charter is far more than a trading license. It comes close to a royal mandate: full control over Dutch trade in Asia. But control doesn't end there. The company can sign international treaties, raise armies, conquer territories, and even govern entire colonies. With nearly 150 trading ships, around 50,000 employees, and a private army of 10,000, the VOC doesn't operate from the sidelines. It moves confidently like a state with sales figures. Nowhere is their dominance stronger than in the East Indian Islands. In 1610, the VOC receives permission to establish a post at the Siliwang River. By 1619, they conquer Jakarta and rename it Batavia, the ancient name of the Netherlands. This isn't just a name change. Batavia becomes the center of gravity in Asia. That's why we see so much Dutch influence in Indonesia today, in food, language, culture, architecture. Dutch governors ruled from there for 300 years. But this scale needed more than just bold vision. It needed serious money. Instead of relying on kings or short-term loans, they created something new. In August 1602, the VOC opens its doors to the public. For the first time in human history, a company offers its future to ordinary people through the world's first IPO. When the shares hit the market, capital floods in. At the core are permanent shares. For the first time, ownership in a global company can be freely transferred. This births the world's first secondary market, the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. The innovations don't end there. Traders don't just buy shares, they bet on how they'll look tomorrow. They create a market of speculation and arbitrage. They use all the tools Wall Street uses today. From an index value of just 100 in 1602, VOC shares rise to about 1,000 by the 1720s, an astonishing tenfold increase. But with this risk came a legal innovation, limited liability. If a ship sinks or a trade route collapses, investors only lose what they put in. Their personal property remains safe, their families protected. Suddenly, people invest much more confidently. The Dutch financial influence doesn't stay confined to the Netherlands long. It crosses borders and shapes Britain, and later America. In 1688, England faces a political crisis. King James II has lost Parliament's trust. British leaders seek a Protestant heir. They turn to James's daughter Mary, married to William of Orange. William sails to England with troops and a mindset shaped by the Dutch Republic, one that merges capital with government. The result is the Glorious Revolution. William and Mary take the English throne. But this isn't just political reshuffling, it's a financial revolution. During William's reign, England founds the Bank of England, creates public credit, introduces government bonds, and finances wars through capital markets. These are Dutch innovations, now written into British law. But the story reaches further back. Decades before William sets foot on English soil, Dutch ships had already crossed the Atlantic. In 1609, a ship called Halve Maan reaches the harbor we today call New York City. In 1624, the West India Company founds New Amsterdam at the southern tip of Manhattan. On first glance, just a trading post, but its structure tells another story. Organized streets, strong trading networks, diverse communities. The Dutch transformed the island into a commercial center on the path to becoming the financial center of the New World. In 1664, the British take over the city and rename it New York, but they don't erase it. They keep much of the Dutch structure because it works. New York inherits legal structures, credit customs, and institutional habits from Amsterdam and London. This shared DNA quietly lays the foundation. But even a giant has limits. By the late 1790s, cracks begin to show. The company that once ruled the seas sinks under the weight of its own ambitions. Power scaled quickly, but oversight couldn't keep pace. Corruption crept in. Internal divisions deepened. With rising military costs and competition from Britain and France, the VOC found itself surrounded. In 1795, the VOC is no longer almighty. The Dutch government takes control and nationalizes the company. Founded in 1602 with a 21-year trading monopoly in Asia, it finally dissolves in 1796. Important, we must also talk about the atrocities.
The VOC committed terrible crimes during its expansion in Asia. Massacres on the Banda Islands, where the indigenous population was almost exterminated, the Amboina Massacre, the Batavia Massacre with thousands of Chinese civilians killed, forced labor, exploitation, violence against native populations. These dark chapters must not be forgotten. Today, the Netherlands is no longer a seafaring empire, but a financial empire. Dutch holdings abroad exceed $3.5 trillion, an astonishing footprint for a country with fewer inhabitants than California. Behind this enormous capital network, one family still casts a long shadow, the House of Orange-Nassau. They still rule today. The crown may be ceremonial, but their connections are nothing symbolic. From defense to energy to corporate governance, the royal family remains deeply connected to Dutch industry. From the Rothschilds to the Rockefellers, these names dominate conversations about capitalism. But they didn't invent the model, they just followed it. Long before them, there was the House of Orange. They built the capitalist blueprint. The Netherlands may no longer rule the seas, but Dutch capital moves across borders today with more influence than fleets ever could. This brings us to a question that's still very important today. If markets now have the power once reserved for monarchs, who rules the markets? Who wears the crown when the crown is invisible?